The remote island in Indonesia was exactly as she had imagined it would be. Remote, with hardly a single trace of human civilization. It was Zarella's dream destination, though. She had spent the last 2 years planning this trip, and the timing could not have been better. A graduate student in geology, Zarella had traveled halfway around the world to conduct research on an active volcano, its precise location with respect to the shifting tectonic plates made it one of the most unusual volcanoes on Earth. Perfect for her research. It was also one of the most dangerous, but that was part of its allure. As her small hired boat approached the island, she felt a rush of anticipation. The dense jungle looked untouched, a solid wall of green meeting the ocean's edge. "Are you sure about this?" asked Anton, her guide and only companion on this journey. From behind his thick beard, he gave her a skeptical look. "Absolutely," Zarella replied, unable to keep a grin from her face. She adjusted her glasses and pulled out a map. "See? We'll set up camp here on the east side. That should put us in the perfect position for data collection." Anton gave a resigned nod and steered them toward a narrow beach where they could land. The roar of waves was the only sound they could hear as they landed. Her advisor had tried to talk her out of taking this trip. "Not now," she had said. "Not when it's showing heightened activity. For all we know, it could be on the verge of a tremendous eruption. Please wait for it to calm down a bit before going." Zarella declined. "But there's a larger chance it won't explode. We don't really know. That's why I'm conducting this research in the first place, to better inform our models of volcanoes. I couldn't imagine a better time to go." There was nothing else her advisor could have said. She was dead set in her ways. Now that she was on the island, unpacking and setting up camp with Anton, she was more excited than ever before. "I wish we could hike up there right this minute," she exclaimed. "We have plenty of time for that tomorrow," Anton assured her. "Right now we have to make sure the camp is set up properly. You never know when the weather will turn around here." "I'm only joking, Anton. Just make sure you are ready for a trek tomorrow." Hours later, when the last stake in their tents had been planted firmly in the sand, Anton reached for his machete and began sharpening it. "We will need this to cut a path through the jungle. I think it gets less dense a few miles in, but the first few miles will take hours." After dinner, Zarella popped some sleeping pills and drifted off into a deep sleep. She would need as much energy as possible for tomorrow's hike. Zarella woke to a pre-dawn chill and the sound of distant thunder. At first, she mistook it for a storm. Then, with a thrill, she realized it was the volcano's low rumble. She dressed, nudged Anton's tent until he woke, and stared dreamily toward the dark silhouette rising against the horizon. "Already putting on a show," she said, her eyes alight with excitement. Anton opened his tent and squinted at it through bleary eyes and mumbled something about coffee. "Just give me a minute," he groaned. By the time they were packed and ready to set off, the sun had risen enough to cast a hazy light over the island. They plunged into the jungle, machete flashing as Anton slashed a path through the tangled vegetation. It was slow going, but Zarella didn't mind. Every step brought them closer to the volcano. The rumbles from the volcano grew louder. It was already midday before they reached the base of the large volcanic cone. "How are you doing, Anton? It's just a couple more miles to the first location where I want to put a sensor, but it will be steep. Sweating profusely from the hard work of cutting a path through the dense jungle, Anton took a long drink from his canteen. "I'm fine. Just don't expect me to keep up with you on the way up." Zarella laughed and adjusted the backpack full of equipment on her shoulders. "It's hard work for me too, you know. Let's start heading up." The jungle thinned out as they ascended, giving way to sparse clusters of trees and eventually to a barren landscape of volcanic rock. Zarella's heart raced with the thrill of being so close to such raw power. She stopped every few minutes to jot down notes and check her GPS, her fingers smudged with ash when she wrote. Anton followed at a slower pace, taking rests every so often. He kept an eye on the plume of smoke above them, muttering something about it getting thicker. "Do the earthquakes seem to be getting more powerful?" he asked Zarella. "Yes, they do, but I don't think they are concerning. Let's keep going." By mid-afternoon, they reached a ledge that overlooked a wide caldera. Zarella set down her pack and pulled out her equipment. It only took her a few minutes to set up. Almost as if on cue, a tremendous explosion and small plume of lava erupted from somewhere near the center of the caldera. "Aren't volcanoes awesome, Anton?" Anton nodded. "Yeah, awesome. But I would like to get off this volcano as soon as possible." "Right behind you, I'll admit that the explosion was a bit much. At least the sensor is set up. Let's go." Following the same path downhill and back through the jungle, the return trip took only about a quarter of the time. The volcano's eerie explosions prodded them on as well. Even Zarella began to worry that it was closer to erupting than she had expected. Back at camp, her worries grew as the earthquakes became stronger. "What if we make a run for it? Head to the boat," Anton suggested, looking nervously toward the beach. "If I go back now, I'll never be able to forgive myself," she replied. She pulled out her laptop and hunched over, scanning the data. "I think we can last the night. I would really love to set up a couple more sensors." Anton sighed but didn't argue. Instead, he went to their campsite and packed their essentials in case they had to leave quickly. Zarella stayed up late, eyes glued to the screen as data streamed in. Outside, she could hear Anton snoring over the low thunder of the mountain. By midnight, the tremors had grown so strong that she could barely type. She finally shut the laptop with shaking fingers and crawled into her sleeping bag. She didn't sleep long. An enormous earthquake and explosion jolted her awake before dawn, and she caught a glimpse of a vivid orange glow through the tent's flap. As far as eruptions went, it was a small one, but it was much larger than anything she had seen in person. "Zarella, we've got to leave," screamed Anton. "All right, fine, but I need to get a closer look at that lava flow first. It looks like it crossed our trail from yesterday. Pack what you want, but I have to do this." "What is wrong with you, Zarella? Do you want to die? Be back before you know it." Zarella bolted toward the jungle, adrenaline propelling her forward. The ash cast an eerie twilight over the island. She glanced back once to see Anton frantically throwing supplies into the boat. She followed their hacked-out trail, heart pounding as she anticipated the lava's path. When she reached the point where the lava flow crossed their trail, she stopped in awe. The molten rock glowed menacingly, a river of fire that seared everything in its path. She took a few quick pictures and measurements, every instinct screaming at her to leave. But before she could go, she noticed that the lava flow carried with it a number of what looked to be small turquoise spheres. She had never seen anything like them before. Some of them had even dislodged themselves from the magma, bouncing and rolling far away. Curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to collect one to figure out what it was. One of them had come to rest just a few feet from her. She emptied both of her water bottles onto the little turquoise rock to cool it down, then tentatively grabbed it with a thick glove. It didn't burn. She held it carefully as she ran back to Anton in the boat before stashing it somewhere safe. The data she collected from the volcano over the next 2 weeks was more than enough to write her doctoral dissertation. Her advisor scolded her, again, for taking such a risk, but couldn't completely hide her excitement from Zarella. But Zarella was equally interested in the spherical turquoise rock and opted to store it at home in a glass container where it could be monitored. For 2 weeks, it had done nothing. Then one day, it began rolling around the small container, as if something were inside. She took the next day off from writing her thesis, opting to study the movements of the odd little round rock instead. She didn't have to wait long. A crack formed on one side of it, and a small little red insect pulled itself out. She watched in awe as the insect shook itself free, then unfurled a pair of bright red wings, not too unlike a tiny moth. Zarella spent the rest of the day watching the movements of the little moth-like creature, unsure of what to do. Her advisor would love to see it, she reasoned, so decided to bring it with her the following day. But when morning came, the glass container was empty. Upon closer examination, she found a small little hole in the glass. The hole appeared as if it had been made by a drill bit. She scanned the countertop and the rest of the room, but found no trace of the little red insect. Over the next couple weeks, she dove into writing her research paper. So much, in fact, that she forgot all about the turquoise egg that held that odd little red moth. But one day she found a dead bird on her sidewalk. It appeared to have been eaten from the inside out. It was creepy, she thought, but not unimaginable. She lived near the edge of town. Predators were common here, but she had never heard of anything that would eat a bird like that. She didn't have time to dwell on it, though. She had a research paper to finish. 3 days later, she found another dead bird. This time, she couldn't dismiss how odd it was. Another couple days passed, and then a neighbor mentioned that something strange was happening to the local wildlife. Zarella instinctively knew that it had to have been the little red moth that had escaped from her apartment. Later that afternoon, something hard flew headlong into one of her windows. She looked up and saw it, fluttering furiously on the other side. It rammed into the window again and again and again. Out of panic, she grabbed her phone and threw it towards the window, hard. The phone caused the window to crack, but also seemed to stun the bright red moth. Zarella stood up and cautiously approached the window. The now horrific-looking moth stared back, with eyes jolting to and fro much faster than seemed possible. With a body about the size of a basketball and with a 3-foot wingspan, she felt like cowering, but opted to wave her arms in an attempt to scare it away. The moth continued to look her over, and after an infinitely long handful of seconds, it seemed to have recognized her. Its frantic fluttering eased to a slow beat, more akin to a butterfly. It darted around the edge of the window a few times, and then slowly flew up and away, out of her line of sight. Heart racing, she collapsed onto her couch and pulled a blanket over her face. She couldn't get the moth's horrible appearance out of her mind. The way it beat its wings so frantically, the way its eyes darted 1,000,000 miles per hour, the way it seemed to have stared into her soul, a nightmarish creature from a different era awakened by the volcano, and it knew where she lived. Once she pulled herself together, she grabbed a few things and headed straight to her car. She had to get away, at least for a few days. She managed to pull out of her driveway and made it to the end of her street. But it was a busy intersection, and it usually took a couple minutes to turn out. On this particular occasion, a large black raven alighted itself on the stop sign. She tried to look away. She didn't want to think about birds or moths or volcanoes now. She just wanted to leave. But out of the corner of her eye came a red streak. It darted straight towards the raven. Bright red moth and raven tumbled off of the stop sign and into the road. The moth had completely encircled the raven with its strong wings, and they rolled chaotically around the intersection. Zarella stared in horror, begging for it to end. Eventually the raven stopped fighting, apparently dead. The red moth stood up, a devilish glint in its scouring eyes. It stood over its prey and spread its wings as high as possible, as if signaling for a mate or exerting dominance. And then came a blood-curdling, grating screech, unlike anything she had ever heard. 3 ear-shattering screeches later, it extended a long needle-like proboscis from its horrendous mouth, inserted it into the raven's chest, and began feeding. Red wings still spread high into the air. Zarella stepped on the gas as hard as possible. She aimed straight towards that abomination. She had to kill it. She heard a thump and saw a flurry of red wings. Had she killed it? She swerved to avoid hitting a car and then sped off as quickly as possible. But in her rearview mirror, she spotted it again. No, she screamed. It was gaining on her, and fast. It was only a few moments before it was in front of her again. The moth wrapped its wings around its body in a spiral pattern, gaining angular momentum, and dove towards her windshield. It made a beeline straight for her heart. Zarella's reaction time wasn't quick enough, but the moth didn't quite hit its target. A spiderweb crack radiated across her windshield, but it held fast. The moth's needle-like proboscis stopped just inches from her chest, stuck into the glass. Zarella screamed in panic. The moth did too, fluttering even more frantically than ever before. At first it tried to dig deeper into the window, still trying to get at Zarella. With no success, it tried to go backwards to unstick itself from the window. Out of pure horror and a surge of adrenaline, Zarella reached out with both hands and clasped the moth's blood-red proboscis. The moth screeched terribly as she tried with all her might to break the proboscis off. She couldn't believe how sturdy it was. The moth, also in a state of growing panic, began fluttering in a circle, trying to get her to lose her grip. She felt the proboscis radially turning between her hands, but she couldn't let go. Not now. Not when this monster wanted to kill her. She readjusted her grip as well as possible and pulled as hard as she possibly could with every fiber of her being. Suddenly, she felt and heard a large snap, like a tree branch, as the moth's proboscis snapped off into her hands. She threw it away from her and watched as the moth tumbled to the ground, still flapping wildly and screeching loudly as she sped down the road. She couldn't stop driving, not until she was 3 states away and satisfactorily hidden in a friend's house. Zarella, can you tell me anything else about what happened? Something attacked you from the sky? Her friend asked. Never. I never want to think about it again. I can't get it out of my mind, she cried as she lay on the couch. Sorry for asking. Can I get you anything? No. I just need to be left alone. Thanks for letting me crash." It took Zarella months to recover from her incident with the demonic moth, longer still for her nightmares to subside. She must have killed the moth. Otherwise, she reasoned, its trail of destruction would have surely been plastered all over the news. She was doing so well, it seemed, that she even began to have good dreams of the moth. In her latest dream, she felt as light as air, gliding smoothly through the atmosphere. She laughed to herself as she realized that even though her face was right next to the ugly monstrosity that was the demonic moth's hideous face, she was no longer frightened. It no longer had any power over her. Still, she preferred not to be reminded of the insect, and shook her head and closed her eyes, trying to wake up. She must have been really tired, because she couldn't manage to shake the dream. She fell deeper asleep, barely able to pay attention to the dives and turns as the moth took long arcs through the air. It was almost soothing, and she concentrated on that feeling to put the creature out of her mind. It wasn't until hours later, when she opened her eyes and spotted the volcano, that a twinge of fear broke through her tranquil sleep. Quite the dream, she mused, still held firmly by the moth. When she concentrated back on the moth, this time a jolt of fear and revulsion reverberated through her being. "Stop!" she yelled, desperately trying to thrash free. She imagined waking back up in her bed, but for some reason couldn't wake up. She hadn't considered the possibility that she was not actually dreaming, until another couple minutes went by. The moth that had been carrying her dropped her 20 or 30 feet, and she crashed hard into a pile of volcanic rocks near the rim of the volcano. Sharp pain radiated through her body, but try as she might, she could neither move nor scream. Could it have possibly been sleep paralysis? She had read about that before, where sometimes a person could become stuck halfway between a nightmare and the waking world. She pleaded with herself to wake up quicker, but still nothing happened. Rows and rows of the grotesque red moths surrounded her, as if her slamming into the ground had summoned them from hell itself. The largest of them all landed on the ground next to her and began feeling her with its long, sharp proboscis, curious about how she felt and tasted. At the same time, its eyes scanned her in that impossibly quick way she hated. Suddenly, it gave one of those horrific screeches. She squeezed her eyes shut, and as if a spell had broken, she regained full consciousness. She was happy to be back. "What?" she screamed. She was still there, laying in pain below the moth. It screeched again, and this time it was joined by the screeches of hundreds of other moths. 3 times they all screeched together. Zarella covered her ears in desperation, trying to drown them out. How was that possible? One of them must have found her and sedated her. She opened her eyes just in time to see the large moth in front of her extend its wings towards the sky, in the same way the smaller one had done when it was about to consume the raven. She couldn't bear to watch anymore. She closed her eyes and waited for the end. But instead of a sharp pain in her chest, as she expected, the only thing she noticed was a sharply rising temperature. Confused, she opened her eyes for the final time, an instant before the large moth grabbed her tight in its wings, which wrapped around her, searing hot and tight. The moth squeezed her until all the oxygen left her lungs, until her ribs began to crack, until she wondered if she would die first from the suffocation or from the heat. It was the last thing she ever wondered.